Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the research to look closely at one of the absolute most popular areas of fitness, and that's building the chest. But rather than just relying on standard gym lore, we're going to discover what the actual biomechanical data and electromyography research reveal. Together, we'll decode the science to see exactly how we can optimize our time, maximize growth, and, protect our joints along the way. Let's get right into it.
Here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the anatomy of the chest, then tackle the barbell versus dumbbell press, jump into the fly debate, explore stretch-mediated hypertrophy, optimize our angles and stability, and finally, build the ultimate chest protocol.
Starting off with Section 1, Anatomy of the Chest. This is the foundation of pectoral growth.
Now, when you look at the sheer complexity of the muscle architecture here, it's actually incredibly fascinating. It's like a giant puzzle. The main driver is the pectoralis major, which is divided into three distinct regions. You've got the clavicular head at the top, the sternal head right in the middle, and the abdominal head at the bottom. Because these muscle fibers run in completely different directions, the research suggests they actually require different pressing angles to fully activate. Beneath that, we find the pectoralis minor. This is a smaller muscle, but it's absolutely crucial for shoulder rotation and stability. Then there's the serratus anterior. You might know this as the boxer muscle. This is what gives you that strong forward reach and really stabilizes your scapula during heavy presses. And finally, the subclavius, which is just a tiny muscle that elevates the collarbone. Understanding this interconnected web is really our first step in figuring out exactly how to push and stretch to trigger serious growth.
Moving on to Section 2, the barbell versus dumbbell press, the heavy-duty debate.
So, when we look at the mechanical trade-offs between fixed and free weight pressing, the data is really compelling. You've probably wondered which one is actually better, right? Well, the science shows that barbells allow us to lift approximately 15 to 20% more absolute weight than dumbbells. Because the bar locks your hands into a symmetrical, highly stable position, your nervous system can just generate incredible, raw force. This drives immense mechanical tension straight into the chest. However, the dumbbell press offers a completely unique hypertrophic advantage, and that's range of motion. Because your hands are moving independently, we can lower the weights deeper past the torso, achieving a profound eccentric stretch on the pectorals. Plus, dumbbells force the left and right sides of your body to work independently. This activates those essential stabilizer muscles we talked about and corrects muscular imbalances. So it turns out neither is inherently wrong, they just serve entirely different mechanical purposes, and understanding exactly why makes all the difference in your training.
Section 3 brings us to the fly debate, cables versus free weights.
The absolutely crucial point here is the resistance curve. Discovering how this works completely shifts the paradigm for most lifters. When you're doing a dumbbell fly, at the very bottom of the movement, the external moment arm, which is essentially just the horizontal length of your arm, is at its absolute maximum. This gives you a fantastic, growth-inducing stretch. But as those dumbbells come together at the top, gravity is pulling the weight straight down into your shoulder joints, not outward. So the tension on the pecs drops to virtually zero. Cables actually solve this biomechanical flaw beautifully. Because the resistance is provided by a pulley system, the line of pull remains constant. Your pecs are forced to fight that resistance across the full excursion of the muscle, from the deepest stretch all the way through the peak contraction at the top. For pure isolation and endurance, the constant tension of cables proves to be a massive, massive upgrade over dumbbells.
All right, Section 4, Stretch-Mediated Hypertrophy, the Science of Muscle Excursion.
Stretch-mediated hypertrophy is pretty much revolutionizing how we understand muscle growth right now. It's essentially growth that's triggered when sarcomeres, which are the basic contractile units of your muscle fibers, are placed under heavy load while fully stretched. Recent studies have demonstrated something truly amazing. Simply training the bottom half of a movement, where the muscle is elongated under tension, can translate to nearly 3 times as much muscle growth as training only the top half. No way, right? But it's true. This means a deep, heavy dumbbell press or a perfectly executed cable fly that stretches the chest is biologically signaling your body to synthesize new muscle tissue at an incredibly high rate.
To really underscore this, leading hypertrophy experts and study reviews, including the brilliant work of Menno Henselmans and RP Strength, note that the stretch itself is a primary driver of hypertrophy. Neglecting a significant portion of the range of motion means some muscle fibers may remain understimulated. So think about it. If we are cutting our reps short and stopping inches above the chest, we might literally be leaving our best gains on the table. A safe, deep stretch under load is absolutely non-negotiable for maximizing your chest development.
Let's dive into Section 5, Optimizing Angles and Stability, where we really dial in the details.
Let's look at the data regarding the perfect incline angle for that upper chest, the clavicular head. There's this fascinating study published in the European Journal of Sports Sciences by Parpa and colleagues. They actually hooked trained men up to electromyography sensors to measure muscle activation at different incline bench angles. Notice the progression here. At a shallow 20-degree incline, activation sits at 0.59 millivolts. Bumping the bench up to 32 degrees increases that activation to 0.64. But the sweet spot, the absolute highest upper chest activation recorded in this study, was at a 43-degree incline, reaching 0.66 millivolts. Biomechanically, this makes perfect sense, because the clavicular fibers align perfectly with the downward vector of gravity at that exact angle. However, keep in mind that going too steep, like pushing up to 60 degrees, aggressively shifts the workload completely away from the chest and onto the front deltoids. So sticking to that 30 to 45-degree pocket seems optimal for upper chest development.
And this leads us to a very common question, and honestly a trend you see in gyms all the time. Do unstable surfaces, like doing push-ups on a Bosu ball or a T-bow, actually build more muscle by engaging your core and stabilizers?
Well, an exhaustive 8-week study by Colby Medrano and colleagues gives us a pretty surprising answer. They investigated advanced lifters performing push-ups on stable versus unstable surfaces. The result? There were absolutely no significant improvements in strength or endurance for the unstable group compared to those just using the solid floor. Here's why. When we introduce an unstable surface, the nervous system has to recruit so much energy just to keep you balanced that it forces a massive reduction in the actual mechanical load you can handle. For advanced lifters trying to trigger hypertrophy, instability literally robs the tension required to grow the muscle. It turns out that stability is actually a prerequisite for force output.
Section 6. The Ultimate Chest Protocol. Let's put all this science into practice.
Let's synthesize everything we've learned using a tier system, popularized by experts like Jeff Nippard. For our A tier, we have foundational free weights, the flat dumbbell press, and the 30 to 45-degree incline press. These are exceptional because they allow for heavy loads in an incredibly deep, stretch-mediated eccentric phase. They are fantastic mass builders. But the S tier, the absolute gold standard for pure hypertrophy, includes machine chest presses and seated cable flies. Why do they beat free weights for pure muscle growth? 2 words: supreme stability. Because the machine dictates the path of the weight, zero energy is wasted balancing the load. We can safely push the pectorals to absolute true muscular failure without worrying about a dumbbell crashing down on us or our stabilizer muscles giving out first. Plus, the cable flies provide that flawless, constant tension curve we discovered earlier.
So, the ideal routine is really a synthesis of these principles. You want to start your workout with heavy, stretch-focused free weights from the A tier to build functional strength and leverage that stretch-mediated hypertrophy. Then, as your stabilizers naturally begin to fatigue, move over to the highly stable, constant tension machine work from the S tier to safely take those muscle fibers all the way to complete failure. Control the eccentrics, prioritize a deep stretch, and execute with precision. Looking at all this data, you kind of have to ask yourself, is your current routine actually prioritizing mechanical tension, or is it just generating a bunch of unnecessary fatigue? Remember, science is constantly evolving. Don't forget to turn on notifications and subscribe so you don't miss the next scientific analysis and protocol. See you in the next video. What topic should we cover next? Let's meet in the comments.